The Cold War was a defining era of the 20th century, shaping the geopolitical landscape for decades. It was a time of intense rivalry and competition, where the world was essentially divided into two camps, each led by a superpower with its own vision for the future. It was a period of intense geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, two superpowers with vastly different ideologies. The ideological divide was stark, with each side believing in the superiority of its own system and way of life. These superpowers emerged from World War II with contrasting ideologies and strategic interests, setting the stage for a prolonged and multifaceted conflict. The post-war reconstruction efforts further highlighted their differences as each sought to rebuild and expand its influence. The U.S. championed democracy and capitalism, advocating for free markets and individual freedoms, while the USSR promoted communism and a centrally planned economy, emphasizing state control and collective ownership. This ideological clash was not just about governance, but also about the very nature of human society and progress. This fundamental clash of ideologies fueled a global rivalry that played out on multiple fronts, from political arenas to economic battlegrounds and military standoffs. Propaganda from both sides painted the other as the ultimate enemy, further deepening the divide. The rivalry extended across political, economic, and military spheres, influencing international relations and domestic policies in both nations. Every major international event was seen through the lens of this competition, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other. Both nations engaged in proxy wars, supporting different sides in regional conflicts such as the Vietnam War and the Afghan-Soviet War, further intensifying their competition. These wars were not just local conflicts, but were seen as crucial battlegrounds in the global struggle between communism and capitalism. They competed for influence in the developing world, providing aid and support to emerging nations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, each seeking to expand their ideological reach. This competition often involved significant investments and strategic alliances, as both superpowers sought to win the hearts and minds of people around the globe. The U.S. sought to contain the spread of communism through various anti-communist campaigns, while the USSR aimed to expand its sphere of influence by supporting communist movements and governments. This led to a series of covert operations, espionage, and political maneuvering that defined the era. This rivalry created a climate of fear and uncertainty, with the ever-present threat of nuclear war looming large over the global population. People lived in constant fear of a potential nuclear apocalypse, with bomb drills and fallout shelters becoming a part of everyday life. The threat of nuclear war loomed large, especially during critical moments like the Cuban Missile Crisis, which brought the world to the brink of nuclear conflict. This event was a stark reminder of the destructive potential of the Cold War, highlighting the need for careful diplomacy and strategic restraint. Within this context, Henry Kissinger emerged as a key figure, navigating the treacherous waters of Cold War diplomacy with a strategic and pragmatic approach. His ability to understand and manipulate the complex dynamics of international relations made him a pivotal player in this global chess game. As National Security Advisor and later Secretary of State under Presidents Nixon and Ford, Kissinger played a pivotal role in shaping U.S. foreign policy, advocating for a balance of power and realpolitik. His strategies often involved making difficult decisions and compromises to maintain stability and protect U.S. interests. A staunch advocate of realpolitik, he believed in prioritizing national interests and pursuing pragmatic solutions over ideological considerations, often engaging with adversaries to achieve strategic goals. This approach sometimes drew criticism, but was effective in navigating the complexities of the Cold War. Kissinger's approach to diplomacy was characterized by a willingness to engage with adversaries, a focus on balance of power, and a mastery of strategic maneuvering, which often involved complex negotiations and back-channel communications. His ability to think several steps ahead allowed him to outmaneuver opponents and secure favorable outcomes. Kissinger's tenure coincided with a period of significant change in the international system, marked by shifting alliances and emerging global powers. The world was becoming more interconnected, and traditional power structures were being challenged. The Cold War was evolving, with periods of heightened tension interspersed with moments of détente, where both superpowers sought to reduce hostilities and engage in diplomatic dialogue. These moments of détente were crucial in preventing the Cold War from escalating into a full-blown conflict. The rise of new powers, including China, challenged the existing bipolar order, adding new dimensions to the global power struggle and necessitating a re-evaluation of strategies. This shift required a more nuanced approach to diplomacy and international relations. The 1973 oil crisis highlighted the growing importance of economic interdependence, as nations realized that economic stability was crucial for maintaining global order. This crisis underscored the need for cooperation and coordination in addressing global challenges. Kissinger's diplomacy sought to navigate these complexities, balancing the need for security with the realities of an interconnected world. His ability to adapt to changing circumstances and think strategically was key to his success. He aimed to advance U.S. interests in a rapidly changing world, leveraging diplomatic channels and strategic alliances to maintain American influence. His efforts were instrumental in shaping the course of the Cold War and ensuring that the U.S. remained a dominant global power. His actions had a profound and lasting impact on the course of the Cold War and beyond, shaping the trajectory of international relations for years to come. Kissinger's legacy is a testament to the power of strategic thinking and the importance of diplomacy in navigating the complexities of global politics. One of Kissinger's most significant foreign policy initiatives was his opening to China. This bold move was not just a diplomatic maneuver, but a strategic recalibration of global alliances. It was a calculated risk that aimed to shift the balance of power during a tense period in the Cold War. At the time, the U.S. and China had no formal diplomatic relations. The two countries were essentially estranged, with no direct communication channels. This lack of dialogue only served to deepen the chasm between them. The two nations viewed each other with deep suspicion. The ideological divide between capitalism and communism further exacerbated their mutual distrust. Each side saw the other as a threat to its way of life and global influence. China, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, was a communist power. Mao's vision for China was one of self-reliance and revolutionary zeal, which often put him at odds with Western powers. His policies were aimed at making China a formidable force on the global stage. The U.S. had fought against Chinese forces in the Korean War. This conflict left a legacy of animosity and mistrust between the two nations. The war had solidified their roles as adversaries in the eyes of their respective populations. However, Kissinger recognized the strategic opportunity presented by the Sino-Soviet split. The growing ideological and political rift between China and the Soviet Union was a potential game-changer. It was a crack in the communist bloc that could be exploited. This growing rift between China and the Soviet Union created an opening for the U.S. It allowed the U.S. to potentially exploit the division between the two largest communist powers. By engaging with China, the U.S. could drive a wedge further between these two nations. Kissinger, with President Nixon's approval, embarked on a secret mission to Beijing in 1971. This covert operation was meticulously planned and executed with utmost secrecy. The stakes were incredibly high, and the success of this mission was far from guaranteed. This groundbreaking trip marked a turning point in the Cold War. It was the first high-level contact between the U.S. and China in over 2 decades. The visit was a diplomatic breakthrough that would have lasting implications. It paved the way for the normalization of U.S. China relations. Nixon's subsequent visit to China in 1972 was a historic event that captured global attention. The images of Nixon shaking hands with Chinese leaders were broadcast around the world. The subsequent Shanghai Communique, issued in 1972 during Nixon's visit to China, outlined a new framework for engagement between the two countries. It addressed key issues such as Taiwan and laid the groundwork for future cooperation. This document was a milestone in diplomatic history. This triangular diplomacy, as it became known, had far-reaching implications. It was a strategic balancing act that reshaped international relations. The U.S. now had a new ally in China, which altered the dynamics of global politics. By establishing a relationship with China, the U.S. gained leverage over the Soviet Union. This new dynamic forced the Soviets to reconsider their own foreign policy strategies. The balance of power was shifting, and the Soviets had to adapt. It also created a more complex geopolitical landscape. The world was no longer divided into two clear-cut blocks. New alliances and rivalries emerged. This complexity required more nuanced and flexible diplomatic strategies. This move signaled a shift away from the rigid bipolarity of the Cold War. It introduced a new era of diplomatic flexibility and strategic maneuvering. Nations now had more options and could play multiple sides to their advantage. Kissinger's opening to China was a bold and controversial move. Critics argued that it was a betrayal of Taiwan, while supporters saw it as a necessary step for global stability. The debate over this decision continues to this day. However, it proved to be a strategic masterstroke. The benefits of this diplomatic breakthrough were felt for decades, influencing global politics in ways that are still evident today. It was a move that redefined the rules of international engagement. It reshaped the global balance of power and had a lasting impact on international relations. Kissinger's triangular diplomacy remains a landmark achievement in the annals of foreign policy. It serves as a testament to the power of strategic thinking and bold action in the realm of international diplomacy. The legacy of Kissinger's triangular diplomacy is still felt today. It set a precedent for how nations could navigate complex international landscapes through strategic alliances and diplomatic ingenuity. This approach continues to influence global diplomacy in the 21st century. Kissinger's triangular diplomacy had a significant impact on U.S.-Soviet relations and the prospects for arms control. The Soviet Union, facing the prospect of a U.S. China alliance, was compelled to adopt a more conciliatory stance. This shift in the balance of power created an environment more conducive to negotiation. The U.S., under Nixon and Kissinger, pursued a policy of détente with the Soviet Union. This policy aimed to ease tensions and reduce the risk of nuclear war. A key element of détente was the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT. These talks aimed to limit the growth of both countries' nuclear arsenals. The first SALT agreement, SALT I, was signed in 1972. It limited the number of anti-ballistic missile systems each country could deploy. This agreement was a significant step towards arms control. It marked a thawing of the Cold War. Kissinger's role in facilitating these negotiations was crucial. His ability to leverage the China card and his understanding of Soviet anxieties were instrumental in bringing the Soviets to the negotiating table. SALT was a testament to the potential of diplomacy. It demonstrated that even in the midst of the Cold War, progress could be made towards a more stable and peaceful world. The success of SALT paved the way for further arms control agreements. SALT II, though never ratified, continued the dialogue on arms control. Kissinger's diplomatic efforts were not limited to arms control. He also played a crucial role in Middle East peace negotiations. His shuttle diplomacy in the region helped to broker ceasefires and peace agreements. Kissinger's approach to diplomacy was characterized by his strategic use of leverage and his deep understanding of global politics. His efforts in arms control and beyond left a lasting impact on international relations. Kissinger's legacy in Cold War diplomacy is a testament to the power of strategic negotiation and the potential for peace even in the most challenging times. His contributions to arms control and international diplomacy continue to be studied and admired to this day. Kissinger's strategies during the Cold War remain relevant as a guide for contemporary diplomatic efforts. The lessons learned from his approach to arms control and international relations continue to inform current policies and negotiations. Kissinger's impact on Cold War diplomacy is a reminder of the importance of strategic thinking and the potential for diplomacy to shape the course of history. His legacy serves as an enduring example of the power of diplomacy in achieving peace and stability in a complex world. The 1973 Arab-Israeli War had far-reaching consequences that extended beyond the Middle East. The conflict not only reshaped the political landscape of the region, but also had significant global ramifications. The war's impact was felt in various sectors, from international diplomacy to the global economy, creating a ripple effect that would be studied for decades. The war triggered an oil crisis that sent shockwaves through the global economy. As the fighting intensified, the world began to feel the pinch of an energy shortage that would soon escalate into a full-blown crisis. The oil crisis of the 1970s became a defining moment, highlighting the vulnerabilities of nations heavily dependent on foreign oil. Arab members of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, imposed an oil embargo on the U.S. and other countries that supported Israel. This strategic move was aimed at leveraging their oil resources to influence international politics and support their stance in the conflict. The embargo was not just an economic weapon, but also a political statement, showcasing the power of oil as a tool of diplomacy. Oil prices quadrupled, leading to fuel shortages, economic recession, and political instability. The sudden spike in oil prices caused widespread panic, with long lines at gas stations and a palpable sense of uncertainty gripping the public. The crisis affected everyday life, from the way people commuted to how industries operated, creating a sense of urgency for solutions. The oil crisis presented a major challenge for Kissinger and the Nixon administration. They were tasked with navigating a complex web of international relations while addressing the immediate economic fallout at home. The administration had to balance domestic pressures with the need to maintain international alliances and manage the geopolitical landscape. It exposed the vulnerability of the U.S. to disruptions in global energy supplies. The crisis underscored the nation's heavy reliance on foreign oil and the urgent need to rethink its energy strategy. This realization prompted a nationwide debate on energy independence and the future of American energy policy. Kissinger recognized the need for a multifaceted response. He understood that a single approach would not suffice to address the myriad challenges posed by the crisis. His strategy involved a combination of diplomatic efforts, economic policies, and energy initiatives to mitigate the impact of the crisis. This response included efforts to conserve energy, increase domestic production, and find alternative sources of supply. The administration launched campaigns to promote energy conservation and invested in research to explore renewable energy options. These initiatives were aimed at reducing dependency on foreign oil and building a more resilient energy infrastructure. However, Kissinger's primary focus was on resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict. He believed that achieving peace in the region was essential for long-term stability and the resumption of oil supplies. His diplomatic efforts were geared towards creating a sustainable peace that would address the root causes of the conflict and pave the way for a more stable Middle East. He believed that this was the key to ending the embargo and restoring stability to the Middle East. Kissinger's diplomatic efforts were aimed at creating a sustainable peace that would benefit all parties involved. His approach was not just about immediate conflict resolution, but also about laying the groundwork for long-term regional stability. Kissinger engaged in shuttle diplomacy, traveling between Arab capitals and Israel to broker a peace agreement. His relentless efforts to mediate and negotiate were instrumental in bringing the conflicting parties to the table. This form of diplomacy required patience, persistence, and a deep understanding of the complex dynamics at play. His efforts led to the disengagement agreements between Israel and Egypt and Syria. These agreements marked a significant step towards de-escalating tensions and fostering a more stable environment in the region. The agreements were seen as a breakthrough, providing a glimmer of hope for a peaceful resolution to the long-standing conflict. These agreements eased tensions and paved the way for the resumption of oil supplies. The gradual normalization of relations allowed for a more predictable and stable flow of energy resources. This stability was crucial for the global economy, which had been severely disrupted by the oil crisis. Kissinger's energy diplomacy played a crucial role in mitigating the impact of the oil crisis. His strategic vision and diplomatic acumen helped navigate the complexities of the situation and provided a framework for future energy policies. His efforts highlighted the importance of a coordinated approach to energy security and international relations. However, it also highlighted the growing importance of energy security as a foreign policy issue. The crisis served as a wake-up call, emphasizing the need for a more resilient and diversified energy strategy. It underscored the interconnectedness of energy, economics, and national security, prompting a re-evaluation of energy policies worldwide. Kissinger's efforts during this period underscore the interconnectedness of geopolitics, economics, and diplomacy in an increasingly complex world. His work laid the groundwork for a more integrated approach to international relations, where energy security became a pivotal element of global stability. The lessons learned from this era continue to influence energy policies and diplomatic strategies to this day, reminding us of the enduring impact of Kissinger's energy diplomacy.